Mr. President, as chairman of the Committee on Energy, I am grateful to my esteemed colleagues for prioritizing the need of the Department of Energy, especially with the looming energy crisis threatening not only our country, but the world. I fully support the flexibility given to the DOE for its total electrification program as it allows the department to implement the project effectively. Indeed, this program is critical in ensuring this basic need for everyone, not just in cities or big provinces. It's high time na magkaroon po tayo ng kuryente ang bawat kabahayan sa ating bansa. Off-grid areas have been recurring critical problem due to the lack of NPC's capability to pay the generation companies. Authorizing the NPC to use subsidies from 2014 to 2021 would capacitate it to pay the generation companies providing electricity in off-grid areas. Pare-pareho lang naman po tayo ng kagustuhan na magkaroon tayo ng sapat at maasahan na kuryente para matigil ang paulit-ulit na problema ng brownout. In other words, energy is security. In addition to this, gusto rin po nating mapababa ang presyo ng kuryente sa bansa para hindi na mahirapan ang publiko at lalo pa tayo magka-attract ng investors. How do we achieve this, Mr. President? We find alternative sources of energy, including the possibility of nuclear energy. Also, by fully supporting the transition to renewable energy through hybrid generation system instead of diesel gensets, we will reduce the negative impact to our environment of conventional energy sources. The energy sector is a primary driving force to achieve optimum economic development of the nation. President Bongbong Marcos has placed the energy sector as a top priority in his agenda, and we are supporting all explorations of alternative energy sources for our country. There are short, medium, and long-term plans for our energy industry. We will support it with both this budget and corresponding legislation. It is our role to provide adequate fiscal resources for these agencies to responsibly carry out their functions. The cost of policy and regulatory implementation must be given a definitive enabling source. We, here at the Senate, are that force. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. President.
Add to the discussion with the permission of the Minority Floor Leader.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Although I was a proponent of nuclear energy as a cheaper alternative source of electricity fuel for our country, I had a visit with Senator J.V. Ercito in the north of France when we had our parliamentary visit there this break. And I had the opportunity to visit one of their biggest nuclear facilities, and that they have a brand new reactor worth 1,600 megawatts worth of power for one reactor alone. And we were actually able to enter the reactor. We were so impressed with the technology, being that France is the #1 nuclear provider in Europe with 58, no, Sherwin? 58, Chairman, 58 nuclear reactors. There are a number of hurdles lang for us to be going into the nuclear power program. #1, they were concerned about our, and this is coming from them, our ring of fire, where we have apparently in areas in France, they haven't had earthquakes for centuries, and if they do have one, it's below magnitude 3, very, very low magnitude. When I told them about our magnitude that hit Abra when we were there a few days prior, they couldn't believe it at 6.7. Sabi na, oh, that's unheard of here. Sabi ko, we have that all the time in the Philippines. In Bohol, in Abra twice, in Mindanao, we have always five in the Richter scale. So that's quite concerning for them. Of course, also the issue on typhoons. Second is the cost. I realized how costly it was to build one of these reactors. It was by the hundreds of billions of euros, which technically would have re-entered into the trillions. I think one power plant complex would cost us our whole national budget for 1 year. So napakamahal. And second, their timeline was about 10 years per project. So it's a long period. So it's not that we're closing the doors and ideas to nuclear energy, but I think at this point in time, we need to act on the expensive rates of power. We have all the resources for renewable energy. Sabi ko, kung sa hangin lang, sobra-sobra yata tayong hangin, di ba, Minority Leader? The whole eastern seaboard of the Philippines is full of air coming from the Pacific Ocean. We can tap that. Kung kailangan natin ng 1,000 megawatts, then let's build 1,000 turbines all across north and central and southern Philippines, the eastern seaboard. I think it can be done quicker actually with renewable energy. I'm glad that on the helm now is Secretary Popolotilla, who I had an opportunity to work with when I was a congressman. He knows his stuff, he knows his work very well. And I think that's what we should be pushing for. Ang kailangan lang natin, I think, is a more unrestricted open access market so that there will be people who will invest. Kasi yung FIT, Mr. Minority Floor Leader, Mr. Chairman, the feed-in tariff is limited because it's a tax that you pay. It's not a tax. It's a levy that's paid by everyone for renewable energy all over the Philippines. But if there was an open access wherein operators and builders can actually sell their electricity to, renewable energy can compete very well. Because napakamahal na yun ng diesel, ng bunker, ng coal. So if you have solar, hydro, wind power generation, as long as you tell the developers, pwede mo ibenta yan sa open access market, they will build. They will build. I'm a believer in renewable energy. We were together, boss, I was with your father when we passed the Renewable Energy Act. He was so supportive of it as Minority Floor Leader at the time. So let's be the leader in renewable energy, particularly since being on the ring of fire, we have the advantage of volcanoes, which is geothermal. We have the advantage of wind, which is from the typhoons. And we have advantage from the heat from the solar panels. And a lot of water from the rain for hydroelectric projects. Yan lang siguro, Secretary, maybe we can assist in pushing that as our #1 agenda at this time. Kung solar lang, tsaka wind power, those power plants can be set up in 2 years. Not 10 years, 2 years. And hopefully by midterm, maganda na po yung electricity rates. But the key there, and I know ERC is listening, si Attorney Mona is a good friend. She's highly qualified for the position. I'm so happy she's there. And she's tough. She's tough on this issue. You need open access. And that's where NGCP comes in, where they have to make sure that there is our interconnectivity between islands. Kasi to the Minority Floor Leader, Senator Coco, for example, Negros is they're one of the highest producers of solar energy. Pero hindi nila maibenta sa labas ng Negros Occidental. Obviously, overcapacity na yung Negros. Pwede pang ilabas yun. Sa Cebu, pag kulang yung kuryente dun, sa Bohol. Pero hindi nila mailabas because there's no interconnectivity due to the lack of action of our friends in NGCP. So I'm glad that you are really, the ERC is really hounding down on them. Because if not, there will be no new players who will want to put up power plants because they cannot sell. Bilateral contracts are no longer allowed. Wala na po katulad dati, you just contract with the electric cooperatives. There's what you call a CSP now, competitive selection process. Pero kung may open access lang, where they can sell in the open market, Secretary, ang daming waiting in the wings now for that action. Lalo na when the Supreme Court came out that foreign ownership of renewable energy plants are allowed. Dati kasi 60-40 kaya matamlay ang pag-invest. So yun lamang po ang gusto kong isama dito sa discussion na ito. And I'm in full support of our minority, the minority bloc, in pushing for a renewable energy agenda for our country. Thank you to our Minority Floor Leader for taking up some of your time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tama ho kayo, Mr. President. Bagay sa atin ng wind energy. Daming mahangin dito sa Pilipinas.
Oo. Sa probinsya lang ng tatay ko, sa Negros Occidental, malakas ang hangin.
Thank you for the manifestation of our Senate President. And I identify with what the manifestation of the Senate President, and I totally agree with him. Pero that's a problem. The national position is, anong tawag mo dyan? Ambiguous or ambivalent? Hindi klaro to explore. And then we are spending, correct me if I'm wrong, 77 million pesos to maintain the Bataan nuclear power plant a year. Tama ba? More or less yung amount. We have spent 270 million to fund, ano po yung Mr. Chairman? The study of the adoption of nuclear power. And then I heard our chairman complain that there is no result. So, kung binuhos natin yun, 70 na yun, 70 a year plus 270, 300 plus na yun. Umabot na siguro ng half billion o 1 billion. Kung binuhos natin sa renewables yun, so nakaproduce ba ng ilang kilowatt yun, o megawatts, kaysa sa ang naproduce, reklamo Where is the study? Yan ang, the chairman will correct me if I'm wrong. I heard you parang complain that where is the result of the 200 plus million?
Yeah, Mr. President, just to update the body on that, I actually talked to the secretary about that. We did fund a feasibility study for nuclear during the last DOE administration, amounting to about 266 million.
266.
But it was partially used. No, only 40 million, I think. Around 40 million was used to come up with some form of study, and also a survey that they conducted. So that 266 is actually returned to Treasury because it was never used. But it led to the promulgation of that Executive Order 164 entitled Adopting a National Position for a Nuclear Energy Program and for Other Purposes. So, in short, Mr. President, the new DOE administration is not closing its doors to any technology. In fact, we should not. And that's also my personal take on this. Technology evolves. The nuclear technology is also evolving. In fact, a lot of the countries and a lot of the countries who are interested in participating in our nuclear program are not selling us the big type of nuclear technology, but the smaller ones, what they call the SMRs, the small nuclear reactors, ranging from 100 megawatts to maximum probably of around 300 megawatts. So, in other words, Mr. President, technology of nuclear is also becoming smaller, becoming more agile, becoming safer, because they know that the criticism against nuclear, it's always overpriced, it takes a long time to build. So countries like Korea, China, the US is leading the research and development to reduce the size of nuclear. And that's what I think we should be looking at. The Philippines is not so big, and building massive nuclear power projects will also hurt our grid if that project will have problems in the future. So a good way of making our grid flexible is to have smaller ones. So whenever there's a problem with the smaller ones, it doesn't affect the entire grid. So my point there is technology is evolving. It's becoming safer. It's becoming cheaper. And those are the things that we should study if the possibility of adopting them fits our need.
Is there an item in the budget where we spend for the study of the rehabilitation and future use of the Bataan nuclear power plant? Marami kasi ako nababasa about Russia, Korea, South Korea. Are we spending for all of this?
No, Mr. President, there's nothing in the budget that will study the revival of the Bataan nuclear
nothing in
power
the budget.
plant. In fact, Mr. President, my personal research, I've talked to the Koreans, I've talked to the Chinese. I've heard the Russians. All of them are saying that the Bataan nuclear power plant is beyond economical repair, no? Because technology has dramatically leapfrogged over the last 4 years, that it's better to build the smaller ones that are more efficient and that can deliver cheaper electricity to our consumers.
Mr. President, if I may interject with the permission of Senator Pimentel, the Minority Leader. I think, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, I encountered in the budget of the Department of Science and Technology an item which calls for a study of nuclear ingredients, uranium, and if I can recall it correctly, the situs is Pangasinan, Mr. President. So apparently, if there is a disconnect here, the item is lodged in another agency. But indeed, there is a study, an ongoing study, funded under the DOST budget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah, Mr. President, I remember when we visited Austria with the minority leader, we were also toured to the other uses of nuclear. No? And nuclear can be used for medicine. I think that facility that we went to is for agriculture. No? And from the information of the good secretary, that particular item in DOST's budget is for other uses of nuclear other than power. So they're looking at agriculture, medicine, and other uses.
Radioactive material. Tama. Thank you for the interventions and for the inputs, Mr. Chairman. So at least naklaro, no? It's not about the rehabilitation kasi ito na lang, I'll just put in my two cents worth. Kasi may local government code na eh. That yung Bataan, wala pa nun eh. This time, you also have to get the consent of the community where it is located. So, is that Morong, Bataan? And then, tanong, do we limit it to Morong or to the entire province of Bataan? So, kailangan din po ng kanilang, kailangan siguro ng referendum before that can even be operated as a nuclear power plant. Yes.
Senator Risa is recognized.
Salamat, Mr. President, at sa Minority Leader. Good Chair, just two quick points, just to further keep the debate about nuclear energy in the Philippines open. Una, sabi po ng Chair kanina that nuclear power, aside from the modes becoming smaller all over the world, is now cheaper. May I ask po if the raw materials, the minerals or the chemicals that would be needed for the production of nuclear power, are they, like many forms of renewable energy, are they available locally? Or would we in fact have to import them from other countries?
Thank you for that question, Senator Risa. From my information, the three major suppliers of uranium will be coming from the US, China, and Russia. No? That's from my information. No? There are other small suppliers, but those are the three big suppliers. In fact, China is buying from the US for their nuclear requirements. So we'll be importing the feedstock or uranium that will be used in that nuclear power plant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as compared to the raw materials for most renewable energies which are available domestically, we would have to spend our resources to import these raw materials for nuclear energy. And second and lastly for this afternoon, from this representation, Mr. Chair, the Chair said earlier that nuclear power is becoming safer. I do remember that one of the main issues against supporting development of a nuclear power program in the Philippines is the still, I believe, unanswered question about the disposal of the radioactive waste. Has any section of the nuclear energy industry anywhere in the world actually already settled that question, Mr. Chair?
No, Mr. President, just to be blunt about it, there's no way of disposing nuclear waste. You can only store them in safe facilities, and that's also one of the learnings that we picked up in Austria when we went there. In fact, in Finland, they built this huge underground storage facility about 800 kilometers away from their city. So, in short, there is no way of disposing it. Some countries are recycling it so that they can use a portion of their nuclear waste, but to permanently dispose it, there's no country that can do that. There's no available technology yet that can do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So technology is evolving, but some aspects of some technology, like of nuclear energy, cannot evolve far enough to really substantively settle the issues. And again, as compared to renewable energies, for which we don't have to build those storage facilities that will outlive the lifetime of our generations. Kahit nga po yung half-life of the half-life of the half-life ad nauseum ng mga radioactive waste na yon will outlive all of us in this session hall at kahit yung mga anak at mga apo natin kumpara sa anumang waste na ma-generate ng renewable energy technology. So I will join with the minority leader that the monies that have been spent so far, even for to pay our debt from the Bataan Nuclear Power Plant, na kahit po nung panahon na binenta yan sa atin ng Westinghouse, outdated na po yung model na yun. It was not being used on the US mainland anymore. So even before that nuclear technology further evolved, I join with what the minority leader has expressed, that the money spent so far or wasted so far in the past and being spent now are really more optimally. Kung pag-uusapan lang natin yung economic viability and benefit, much, much better spent to add to what the Senate President has said earlier, public spending for renewable energies. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, and Minority Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Risa. Well, what I learned from this industry is all technologies will have their pros and cons. For example, intermittent power such as wind and solar, they're susceptible to nature, no? And there's no technology yet that can balance them efficiently, except for batteries, at least for now, or gas. No, but as we all know, batteries is still quite expensive, and they're not as efficient yet. But batteries, the prices are going down exponentially also. So that's why I always view the quest to a clean energy system is a transition. No? It's really a transition. There's no available technology right now that we can use, and tomorrow it's carbon free. No, because all of these technologies will have their own pros and cons. So this is also one of the things that we funded actually under the DOE budget in 2022 is to jumpstart our energy transition study. No? Because it's really, we have to really study this very carefully in terms of what technology we can use for the transition and eventual goal later on. The debate on nuclear is raging. It's time immemorial, but because of the desire to achieve a carbon-free future, nuclear is now becoming in fashion again. No, that's why, because nuclear doesn't emit any greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why some countries are rethinking their policy. Countries such as Korea, France. In fact, when we went there, minority leader, I remember clearly, their policy at that time was to get out of nuclear. But because of the Russian incident and also because of climate change, they rethought or changed their policy in nuclear, and they're now the Senate President has had a discussion with them that they are now embarking into more nuclear because of climate change. So we need to study this very carefully. There's no quick answer for now. That's why research is important, and that's why we need to fund research to know the direction that the country should go.
May I just share on the discussion or be part of the discussion? On the issue of small modular nuclear reactors, when we had a chance, we went to visit um, the EDF office, and they showed us the design. They're still years away. They said the only small modular nuclear reactors will be operational by 2031 or 2032, 10 years from now. And that's a 200, I think, megawatt. It is experimental, hindi pa siya commercial. So, medyo matagal pang usapin ito. So we have to look at other alternative sources of energy. But one thing we have in the Philippines, Secretary, I think this is very important. I had my meeting 2 days ago for lunch with the New Zealand former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Helen Clark. And she was representing here a group for sustainable mining. It's a regulatory body, international regulatory body that sets the guidelines for responsible mining. And she says the Philippines now is now the darling of the mining sector because it has the most number of components for battery production, which is copper and nickel. But ang sabi ko nga, I said to those that I talked to, can we just not extract it from the ground? Can we also build the batteries here? Right now, we're sending it to China in boat loads. Can't we do the manufacturing plant in Surigao, for example, or where there are big mining deposits in Caraga? That would be a good undertaking, Mr. Secretary, if you can get industrial battery manufacturers who build the batteries for Tesla and all that. If you can get them to come to the Philippines, set up shop here, there'll be more jobs for our kababayans in these mining areas, more sustainable, and I think that would be a great industry to look into, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick point of information that I want to share to the Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. President. And that's also part of the reason why we converted the electric vehicles law into an electric vehicles industry law.
There you
So
go.
that we will be promoting the entire electric vehicle industry to include the manufacture of batteries. No?
Fantastic.
Yeah, so and the secretary told me that the future, well, this is on the other side. No, the future of clean energy will be based on extractive materials because obviously batteries, the
Yes.
components for batteries will be based on those precious metals that that is needed to make batteries.
Yeah, that's why I'm for sustainable mining. But at the same time, we want these communities to enrich themselves. And hindi lang yung mga may-ari ng mina ang nagiging bilyonaryo. Gusto natin yumaman din ng taong bayan sa mga areas na ito. And putting the plants there, I think, would be a great idea so that they can have a value added to the extracted mines, to the products that they're extracting from the ground. So yun lamang po, I just wanted to share on that point.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for those insights. And it's, I think, we had a rare opportunity of interacting with the French nuclear regulator as well as the operator, and those are the insights that we need in order to have a healthy debate on nuclear.
Oh, it's a bit complicated. I think we really have to study it further. I was very gung-ho about it until I went to France. And when I went to France and I spoke to the regulators, I spoke to the developers, it's not as easy as we think it is.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult, complicated process, and security-wise also. You know, it was so difficult for us to enter the plant, EDF. Kami ni Senator JV, kulang na lang, binali search kami. We had to take out all our stuff. We had to go through 3 security checkpoints because of possible, they're worried of possible terrorist acts. So talagang napakaigpit. Iniisip ko lang, sa security checkpoints lamang, kung kaya ba ng Pilipinas yan. Napakaigpit. Talagang nakapakaigpit. So sabi ko, it's something that we still have to discuss. But yet, if you want to put up a wind turbine plant, you want to put a solar, it can be done in 18 months. So that is something that we should push forward, Your
I
Honor.
agree, Mr. President. That's why I'm also quite gung-ho with renewable energy because I see that, of course, it will improve our energy self-sufficiency in the long run. But again, it's a transition, so we need to balance the pros and cons of different technologies. And tama kayo, Mr. President, hanapin na lang natin yung pinakamahangin na lugar. No? O sa atin, doon tayo magpatayo.
Oo nga. Maraming windmill sa Guimaras. Guimaras, nakatutok sa amin sa Negros.
Because
Lagyan din natin yung Negros. Ha? Tanong mo mga staff ko, sina
why
GP,
it's
sina Carlo.
windy? Why is it windy?
Malakas ang hangin dun.
Because
Dinadaanan ng hangin dun.
nature, Mr. President. Nature.
Galit sa atin, taga Negros, ha?
Mr.
Ako,
President.
taga Negros ako before Bukidnon. So, any other, Minority Floor Leader?
If I may continue, mga last three topics na lang siguro, Mr. President. Kasi,
Parang
but this
binagsak-
one I will pursue.
Mr. President, parang Secretary Lutilla didn't give you a good grade nung college.
Ewan, kalimutan ko na rin kung ano. But this topic was introduced by the Senate President himself, yung open access market.
Open access market.
Okay, open access market. Okay, what are the obstacles to achieving that? Is it law? Is it law or is it ERC regulations? What's wrong? How can we achieve that? Open access market.
Yeah, actually, Mr. President, we do have the ARCOA, the Retail Competition Open Access, although it's not yet at the household level as we want it to be. I remember when I visited Singapore, a condominium owner there can choose on where to buy electricity. No, so, for example, if you are someone who wants to buy from renewable energy, he can go to a renewable energy supplier and buy straight from there. If you want gas, you can buy straight from there. Right now, we're still at the 500 kilowatt level. The aspiration is to go all the way to the household level, but we need to address some technicalities first, no, because there'll be stranded contracts. But those are one of the things that we flagged during the budget hearing, and ERC is now studying on how to bring it all the way down to the household level. So us, consumers, we can choose. If we want to buy from wind energy, if we want to buy from solar energy, we have the freedom to do that.
Ang nangyari kasi, Mr. Minority Floor Leader, the problem kasi there is we don't have also a WESM market. They only have a WESM in Luzon. We have no WESM in the Visayas or in Mindanao. So, and that's where the bulk of the renewable energy projects can be developed. If we had an open we have an access to all the grid. Let's say Mindanao. Maglagay tayo dun sa Davao Oriental ng wind energy, Your Honor, Mr. Minority Floor Leader. We can sell that power technically to Luzon. Problema na yun, wala eh.
Yung cable.
Wala, we're stuck. Everything is island bound.
With the permission of the Minority Floor Leader. Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up question on that. What would it take and how long would it take for us to be able to bring that option down to the consumer? Because I remember when I was in the US, it was a trip with a foundation that was into environment conservation. I just noticed that my family, a lot of them were on the side, kumbaga parang real estate. Nagbebenta din ng ganon. Going, so my cousin who was tagging along with me in my meetings, everybody she met, she would offer, do you want to buy this? You want to get this? Tapos syempre, pag unang pasok, mababa, di ba? But because I was there with the environmental group, sabi sa akin, at the end of the day, pare-pareho lang yan. inuunahan lang ng something attractive in the beginning. But the point is, if you wanted to if you wanted to shift because of policies of a certain company that you appreciated more, like they had a better renewable mix, then you would want to do that. So yun lang, how long and what would it take for us to be able to go in that direction?
Yeah, Mr. President, it's good that that Senator Cayetano experienced that, but I also saw that in Singapore, no, and they're bundling. For example, if you buy from this generation company, they'll bundle it with, let's say, free gym membership, no, depending on your lifestyle, depending on your lifestyle. So it's being done in many jurisdictions, and ERC is tasked to do that. And according to our chairperson, their goal is to pilot it in certain areas within a year's time. So hopefully in 2023, we'll see it in one area. Admittedly, there are some technical, depending on your lifestyle. So they have to replace the meters. They have to review the stranded contracts. There are some technicalities, but it can be done, no? Because it's being done in other countries. And that's what we need for renewable, because people are getting more conscious about green energy. And if I, yeah, Jeff, if consumers can choose straight, no, then that's a big boost for renewable generators. No? But right now, they have other mechanisms, but the goal is to go household level.
Chairman, just to answer, I'm just seeking an answer to our point earlier with Senator Coco Pimentel. May we ask the Secretary in the ERC on that access nga, the open access and the interconnectivity between Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. May timelines ba? Because sa panahon pa ni President Duterte, nagpapangako yung distribution utility natin. Or
Well,
transmission utility.
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, good news is Western Mindanao will operate end of the year. By-
I heard that last year. Last year, it was malapit na. Summer. Tapos naging, tapos na election.
Yeah.
Tapos, so ano na talaga? End of the year? Next year? What is...
End of the year, kaya?
I've been hearing that for the last 5 years. Yung Western market in Mindanao.
Yeah, Mr. President, the commitment of IMAP. Are you with IMAP?
No, since you.
The commitment is by end of the year, Western Mindanao will be fully operational, and I am.
Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Yeah, and they will not wait for the interconnection anymore. So that's a good news. The Senate President is from Mindanao, so he's very passionate about that. The bad news is the interconnection between Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. That interconnection should have been completed by end of the year, but because of delays from NGCP, it became uncertain. No? So we have a new Energy Regulatory Commission chairperson, and she's already been flexing her muscles in making players accountable. It's accountability. No, you promise to finish it this year, you have to finish it
Dapat
this year.
mag-gym si Attorney Mona. Mag-gym para lumaki yung muscles niya.
Yeah, but
Kailangan pakita niya yung muscles niya.
Mr. President, she's already been talagang exerting a lot of
You have our
effort.
support, ma'am, because that's the only way to go. We have to interconnect Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao.
Yeah.
That's the best way.
So the department will come back to us on the definite timetable on when the entire country will be interconnected. Hopefully by next year. No?
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you for the inputs. Alam mo, Mr. Secretary, we're spending 2 hours na on your department. Hindi naman dahil sa pinapahirapan ka. Actually, because we are having, or we might have, an energy crisis. Actually, this is really to highlight the importance of this department and the the agencies connected or attached to this department. So, andito po kami para tumulong. Pero ang tanong, Mr. Chairman, let's say, inapprove na natin yung mga budget. nila, lahat. Billions itong pinag-usapan natin. Sa mata ng consumer, anong pa rin yung presyo ng kuryente? Bababa? Parehas? Tataas? So in effect, siguro, meron ba tayong medium term or near term, medium term plan on how really to, number one, prevent the escalation of energy, electricity costs, or even lead to the decrease in the per kilowatt cost of electricity. Kasi yun, ang topic natin ngayon, budget. Approve na yan, pero ang crisis natin is yung reklamo eh. Reklamo sa baba eh. Reklamo ng ating mga kababayan sa mahal ng presyo ng electricity. Meron ako napanood sa news yung sa Batangas, di ba? Batangas, pinapakita pa nila yung resibo nila, times 3 ba, times 5. So, yun, budget, even if we approve, but anong epekto sa ating mga kababayan?
Well, Mr. President, not to come up with scapegoats, but definitely what happened in Europe affected us. We have to also bear in mind that we import half of our energy requirement, so we're susceptible to global price shocks. But in the short term, the Energy Regulatory Commission is already undertaking measures to make sure that the charges are reasonable and not overpriced. No? 3 things that they're doing. Number 1 is they're undertaking the regulatory reset for utilities and the transmission line, and that will bring down electricity prices in the short run. They're also reviewing the power supply agreement, the PSAs, and this is a call from our Senate President. I remember in his first privilege speech that he called on the regulator to review the PSAs because there are some PSAs that are not attuned to the current price anymore. And then the operation of the WESM in Mindanao will also improve electricity prices in the short run. Of course, in the long run, the department is moving towards energy self-sufficiency, so we will not be susceptible to global price shocks. The recent policy on allowing foreign companies to own 100% of RE will spur RE growth in our country, and that will improve our self-sufficiency in the medium to long run. So the goal here is to be self-sufficient, so we won't be susceptible to price shocks and to global headwinds. And hopefully, in the next 6 years, we'll see some improvement in our energy self-sufficiency.
So, in the matagal pa po, it's hindi sa near term, let's say it's a medium term plan in the next few years.
I think
in the next few years could qualify to be a medium term plan. No?
I think the reset, the PSA review, and the WESM operation will see some encouraging signs within 12 months. No?
Okay. So, tignan pa natin sa next budget.
I cannot
cycle.
say how much, Minority Leader, but I think we'll see some encouraging signs.
Siguro, can we ask the ERC now to print the per kilowatt hour costs or costings as of this date para sa next year's budget, tignan natin, budget cycle, na-print na natin, na-fix na natin yung cost, tignan natin kung bumaba o tumaas.
We'll give you a benchmark on this day.
Yes. For our guidance next year. Kasi narinig ko marami tayong rini-review, pero yun na nga, but when will the reviews end and then when will the benefits be felt? Kasi sabi ni Mr. Chairman, making sure that the rates are not overpriced and that they're reasonable. Biglang naisip ko, what if they're reasonably high? So the plan is really to bring them down, di ba? Kasi yung yung income po ng ating kababayan, eaten by inflation and then hindi tumataas. That's why there's a call now for a legislation sa a national minimum wage. Kasi yun na yan.
But, Mr. Chairman,
sanga na po ito eh.
another positive move is the ERC already started coming up with the IRR for the Lifeline law that we extended and we reformed. No? Before, the Lifeline subsidies being given are given to condominiums, but with the new law that we enacted, it will now go straight to the poorest of the poor. No? So we have now a mechanism to locate where they are and to give subsidies if necessary. No? So this is a targeted system for electricity consumers.
So a lot depends on the ERC in the setup of our energy, our energy administration. A lot depends on the ERC. So tama po tong committee report natin. Dinagdagan natin ang budget ng ERC.
Apo. So apo,
Full support to the ERC, but if changes in the legal regime, in the laws are needed, we are always our offices are always open for the ERC and other practitioners in energy law can always submit to us some ideas kung paano. IPIRA, I think, is the pivotal law involved here, Mr. President. Ngayon, Mr. President, sayang, patapos na sana ako, but the chairman mentioned the about renewable energy. Is it the position of the Department of Energy that foreigners can own 100% renewable energy projects?
Pursuant to the DOJ opinion.
yes, Mr. President, pursuant to the DOJ opinion, Mr. President.
The DOJ opinion, which is based on the constitutional provision. Saan ba yung constitutional provision? Article 12, Section 2, okay, which mentions the sources of potential energy.
Genetic.
Ito pa, Article 12, Section 2 of the 1987 Constitution. All lands of public domain, waters, minerals, coal, petroleum, and other mineral oils, all forces of potential energy, fisheries, forests or timber, wildlife, flora and fauna, and other natural resources are owned by the state. Diba? So, dito yata nakafocus yung DOJ opinion on all forces of potential energy. Because we're missing the next sentences here na yung kung saan yung reserved to Filipino citizens and Filipino corporations. But hydropower is renewable energy. Yes.
But if
Yes, when
you extract water, that's 60/40. But if after you have extracted and it's in a dam, and the generation is generated, then it's 100%.
Yes, Mr. President, hydro is hydro is renewable energy.
correct.
And the way legally, no, it was differentiated is if you extract water, then it falls under the 60/40 rule. No? But if the water has already been extracted, for example, it's in a dam or a pond, then then it's open to foreign investments.
The generation of
The
power.
generation
the
of power.
generation of power through the use of the potential energy in the water in the dam. Yan.
Yes. Great.
Okay, but that's subject to this is just DOJ opinion, but definitely there may come a time when this will be contested in court kasi yung phraseology nga ng constitution natin. Waters, nandito rin yung waters, which is separated by a comma from the all forces of potential energy. So, okay, so I'm just pointing this out, Mr. President, that ako mismo I'm not so sure of the 100% validity of the said DOJ opinion. There is also a some other reasonable interpretation of the said constitutional provision, which that one requires full Filipino ownership of the exploitation of of so-called waters, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the minority leader being a legal luminary and a bar top-notcher, I'm sure the lawyers in the department and the regulator and DOJ is closely listening and taking notes, and they'll be looking at your statements and opinions, Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. President, gusto ko pa sana magtanong sa PNOC-EC and PNOC-RC, pero ano ba yung ano dyan, i-collapse? Ano ba yung, what's the plan for these two subsidiaries to of the PNOC, and what will happen to them? Is there there's a proposal to collapse them, PNOC to absorb them?
Yeah. Well, Mr. President, that's also part of my personal opinion that PNOC as a whole, no, including EC and RC, has really lost its track, no, in terms of direction. And the Secretary just mentioned to me that that's part of the review. And the direction of the department is to put it on track, meaning the direction is to achieve energy security, achieve energy self-sufficiency, explore more oil and gas so that we can have options in case Malampaya
Runs
in the
out.
case Malampaya runs out. So the department is in the process of putting direction to PNOC, Mr. President.
So thank you for that. And then sa ERC, siguro ano na lang siguro if they can just give me an explanation or an elaboration of this news item I just read. Kahapon ba yung kaninang umaga yung NGCP parang criticized ERC and DOE. You're controlled by the same business interest, mga ganun. So,
Well, Mr. President,
Just,
that comes with the territory, Mr. President.
sagutin na lang ito kasi binasa ko yung news report pero medyo baka malalim-lalim na issue to, so just maybe
Yeah, but
yes, can they tell us what's the general dispute all about, Mr.
yeah, well,
President?
it comes with the territory, Mr. President. If you remember, Mr. President, you're also privy, and Senator Binay was also there, that that DOE issued a policy on contracting reserves, ancillary reserves. And to date, NGCP has not yet contracted those. No, and there's also a method. There's also a process to contract that. One of which is through competitive selection process that has to get the approval of the DOE. In short, NGCP did follow that policy. No, and the regulator is tasked to enforce that policy. And since the regulator found out that NGCP is not following the policy, they penalized them. No? 5 million lang. It's actually not so much, 5 million pesos lang. But the message there is you have to follow policy and you have to follow the rules. And that's why I mentioned earlier that ERC has been really flexing their muscles and also holding the industry players to account. It's important because if they will not follow policy, there'll be chaos. And if there'll be chaos, us as consumers will be affected. No? And the ancillary services, the ancillary reserves are very important because that's a buffer that the system can requires and the system can take in case power generation goes down. No? So meron siyang reserba doon. But since it's absent, tayong delikado doon when generation goes down. No? So that's in essence, that was the backstory, Mr. President.
So thank you for that, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman. So we just spent 2 hours, interpolating on the budget of the energy sector or the energy family. Ang isipin niyo po, we spent those 2 hours because we want to help you achieve or accomplish your mission or your tasks. And in the case of energy, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, dito ko masasabi na the test of the pudding is in the eating. Ano ibig kong sabihin? Dapat makita ng kababayan natin na affordable ang presyo ng kuryente. Kung pwede nga mataas na bumaba. So, andito po kami, magtulungan po tayo rito. Pati ang minority, hindi nyo kalaban dito, o hindi nyo critic dito. We will constructively cooperate so that we will achieve that goal to make it affordable. Yung affordable, very subjective. So, kailangan gamitin nating point of view is yung mga naghihirap na daily wage earner, unemployed, or ang tinatawag na
Marginalized.
yung line, ano sabi yung kanina? Lifeline raters, etc. So, tulungan po natin because once we help the poorest of the poor, not by accident or by coincidence or by result, natutulungan na rin natin even the middle class and all those above the poorest of the poor. So thank you. My time is over. I'm now yielding, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minority Leader, for those. And in fact, the DOE has a list of 10 pieces of legislation, all designed to protect the consumers, lower down electricity costs, and achieve energy security. And I think they'll be submitting to us those lists so we can study and hopefully support those pieces of legislation.
And kasama na rin dyan, Mr. Chairman, yung question ko, coal, am I correct, is the cheapest? But I read it's really going up also, no? So
Yeah.
is it still the cheapest?
No more.
No more.
Right now, kasi the per metric ton cost of coal is about $400, coming from $30. So just imagine
So what's the cheapest now, Mr. Chairman?
Renewable.
renewables.
Renewables. Oh, they're how interesting, no? And you know, I've always believed that parang a lot of times when it comes to policy, it's a matter of timing. Like,
Yeah.
wala tayong masyadong ginawa, but suddenly it is now the most affordable. So that's good news for everybody, no? So anyway, let me allow you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, to report.
Just to answer the query of the gentle lady from Taguig, the current energy mix right now is 43% coal, 14% oil, 12% natural gas, and 29% RE. So the target of
29? Was that 29?
29.
Okay.
And the target of the department is to reach 35% RE by 2030 and 50% RE by 2040. And
Sorry, the 35% by 2030,
30.
and then
50% by
By-
2040. So that's the
okay.
target. And the ERC, the regulator, has already started doing this. In fact, I'm also privy to Chairperson Mona's research on how to achieve this. In fact,
Okay.
he's the one who designed this, no? So we raised the requirement for RPS. This is the mandatory purchase of utilities from RE from 1% to 2.5%.
from
So
1% to 2.5%.
So in short, if I'm a utility, I have to buy 2.5% from RE.
Now,
Uh,
that
So-
is very new. This
That's very new.
Okay.
Just came out a
Okay.
few months ago, no?
And is that going to increase further?
Yeah, that's they're studying that, no?
2.5, we get to 35%.
That's if we keep to 2.5, we will reach that 35% and 50%, no? But they're also studying to
I think it was-
possibility to increase it if possible because it's a mix, so we need to
Yeah.
study it very carefully.
Okay. And this already takes into consideration that renewable is already the cheapest, or it might even fast track it.
No, di pa, no.
Though
This-
fast, so it may
Yeah,
even be fast
correct.
tracked. Okay.
That's you're absolutely correct. In fact, this study, when I saw this, 2019, 2020, but you're right, no, the circumstances have dramatically changed.
Sige.
So in fact, market forces will probably push RE up because of the high price of coal.
And I think it would be good to put that on record so that the public understands. And there are things that are within our control, there are things that are not. So if things stay the same, then what would the trajectory be? If it changes a little bit, what would it be? So that we can also explain this better to the advocates. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, I won't take any more time. I will be happily briefed and updated by the energy team on the requested legislation so we can assist the chairman. Well, no longer the budget, but our former chairman also of the committee. Thank you very much.